Please, not in front of him. The words barely carried over the hum of passing traffic, but they hung in the air like something fragile, something that shouldn't have been broken. Ava Johnson sat perfectly still behind the wheel, her fingers resting lightly at 10 and 2, the dashboard casting a soft amber glow across her face. The highway stretched out in long ribbons of dim light, cars rushing past at 60 miles per hour, unaware of the quiet tension frozen on the shoulder. Red and blue lights flickered behind her, reflecting off the side mirror, pulsing against the glass like a heartbeat that wouldn't settle. In the back seat, a small boy sat strapped in, his sneakers dangling just above the floor mat, his wide eyes fixed on the space between Ava and the officer standing outside. Officer Daniel Brooks adjusted his stance, one hand resting near his belt, his posture rigid, practiced, the kind that came from years of believing control meant safety. He watched Ava like she was a question he had already decided the answer to. "Ma'am, I need you to follow instructions," he said, his voice flat, controlled, but edged with something colder, something less patient. Ava nodded slowly, her breath steady even as the moment stretched thin. She turned her head just enough to glance back at the boy, her voice soft, almost a whisper meant only for him. "It's okay. I'm right here." The boy didn't respond, but his fingers tightened around the strap of his backpack, knuckles pale under the dim light. Outside, the night air carried the distant sound of engines, the smell of asphalt still warm from the day's heat. Everything felt too normal for something that didn't feel normal at all. Brooks took a step closer, his shadow cutting across the window, his presence filling the small space like pressure building in a sealed room. "Keep your hands where I can see them," he repeated, slower this time, as if clarity alone could erase doubt. Ava's hands didn't move. They stayed exactly where they were, open, visible, steady. But something in Brooks' expression shifted, a flicker of suspicion tightening his jaw, narrowing his eyes. He wasn't seeing her anymore. He was seeing something else, something shaped by assumption rather than truth. The silence stretched, heavy and fragile, like glass about to crack. A passing truck roared by, its headlights flooding the car for a brief second, illuminating everything. The boy's trembling lip, Ava's calm but tired eyes, the badge glinting under Brooks' chest. Then darkness returned, thicker than before. Ava swallowed, her voice barely audible now, but steady, grounded in something deeper than fear. "I'm reaching for my ID," she said slowly, each word careful, deliberate, as if saying it wrong might change everything. Brooks didn't respond right away. His gaze locked onto her hands, his body tensing, his breath shallow in the quiet. Time seemed to slow, stretching the moment into something unreal, something suspended between what was and what could happen next. In the back seat, the boy shifted slightly, the faint squeak of his shoe against the leather breaking the silence just enough to make it louder. Ava's eyes flickered back to him for half a second, just long enough to remind herself why she couldn't let fear take over. "It's okay," she whispered again, softer this time, almost to herself. And in that single moment, everything balanced on something invisible, something fragile enough to break without a sound. The silence did not break all at once. It shifted, like the air itself had decided to hold its breath longer than it should. Ava's fingers moved slowly, deliberately, lifting just an inch from the steering wheel before stopping again, as if even motion needed permission. The interior of the car felt smaller now, the ceiling lower, the space between her and the officer outside no longer measured in feet, but in something heavier, something unseen. Officer Brooks leaned slightly forward, his eyes narrowing, tracking every movement with the kind of focus that left no room for trust. The flashing lights behind him painted everything in pulses of red and blue, turning his expression into something fragmented, harder to read, easier to fear. Ava kept her voice steady, even as the moment stretched thinner. "My wallet is in my bag," she said, slow and clear, each word placed carefully into the quiet. "I am going to reach for it now." She did not wait for reassurance. There was none, only the sound of a car passing in the far lane, tires humming against asphalt, life continuing just a few feet away as if nothing here mattered. In the back seat, the boy shifted again, his small hand pressing against the window, leaving a faint print that caught the flashing light. His breathing was uneven, quick, the kind that came from trying not to cry. Ava noticed it without turning fully, her eyes flicking upward to the rearview mirror, catching his reflection for just a second. That was enough. Her shoulders softened just slightly, her voice lowering again. "You are okay," she murmured, gentle, grounding, a promise she was determined to keep even if she could not control anything else. Outside, Brooks took another step closer. The gravel beneath his boots crunched softly, but in the quiet it sounded louder than it should have. He was close enough now that his shadow stretched across Ava's hands, cutting through the warm glow of the dashboard. "Do not make any sudden moves," he said again. But this time the words felt heavier, less like instruction and more like warning. Ava nodded, though she was not sure he saw it. Her hand moved again, slower than before, reaching toward the passenger seat where her bag rested. The zipper glinted under the flashing lights, a small detail that seemed suddenly too sharp, too bright. Her fingers brushed the fabric, hesitated, then continued. Time slowed further, each second expanding into something fragile, something that felt like it could shatter if handled wrong. Brooks' breath was visible now in the cooler night air, short, controlled, but uneven at the edges. His gaze did not leave her hand. Not for a second. Not even when another car sped by, headlights briefly washing over them in stark white. In that light, everything became clear for an instant. Ava's calm, the boy's fear, the tension in Brooks' jaw. Then the darkness returned, and with it, the uncertainty. Ava pulled the bag slightly closer, the soft sound of it sliding across the seat breaking the silence just enough to make it louder again. She paused, her hand resting on top of it, as if giving the moment one last chance to settle. But it did not. It only tightened. In the back seat, the boy's voice finally broke through, small, trembling. "Miss Ava," he whispered, barely audible, but enough. Ava closed her eyes for half a second, just long enough to anchor herself. When she opened them again, they were steady, focused. "I have you," she said softly, not turning, not moving faster, just continuing exactly as she had been. And outside, Brooks' stance shifted again, subtle but real, his weight redistributing his shoulders tensing as if preparing for something he could not name. The distance between them had not changed, but the moment had. It was no longer just a traffic stop. It was something else now, something heavier, something that would not end the same way it began. The moment did not snap, it unraveled slowly, like something pulled too tight for too long finally, giving way without warning. Ava's hand slipped inside the bag, her fingers searching carefully, deliberately, brushing past fabric, keys, the edge of a folded receipt, until they found the smooth leather of her wallet. She paused again, just for a breath, just enough to make sure every movement still belonged to control, not fear. Outside, Officer Brooks did not blink. His eyes stayed locked, his posture rigid, but something deeper had taken over now, something quieter and more dangerous than anger. It was certainty, the kind that did not ask questions anymore. "Slowly," he said, though his voice had lost its earlier edge, replaced by something tighter, thinner, stretched over nerves he did not fully understand himself. Ava nodded again, though her movement was small, almost invisible. She lifted the wallet halfway out of the bag, holding it between two fingers so it could be seen, so there could be no confusion. The dashboard light caught the edge of it, a soft reflection that seemed too gentle for the weight of the moment. In the back seat, the boy leaned forward slightly, his seatbelt tightening across his chest with a faint click. His eyes never left Ava. Not the officer, not the lights, just her. Like everything depended on whether she stayed calm. Ava could feel it without turning. That small, silent trust pressing against her from behind. It steadied her more than anything else could have. "I am taking it out now," she said, her voice still even, still careful, as if she could build safety out of words alone. Brooks shifted again, a subtle movement, but enough. His shoulders tightened, his stance adjusting by inches that carried meaning far beyond their size. The flashing lights behind him flickered faster now, or maybe it only felt that way, each pulse cutting the scene into fragments. Red, blue, shadow, light. The world narrowing into pieces that did not quite fit together anymore. Ava brought the wallet fully into view, holding it up just slightly, her fingers steady, despite the weight pressing down on the moment. For a second, nothing happened. The highway noise faded into the background, distant, unreal. Even the wind seemed to hold still. Then something shifted. Not outside. Not in the lights. Inside. A hesitation. A fracture in timing so small it could have been missed if anyone had been breathing normally. But no one was. Brooke's gaze flickered, just once, from the wallet to Ava's face. It was a brief movement, less than a second, but it changed everything. Because in that second, he saw something he had not allowed himself to see before. Not a threat. Not a situation. A person. Tired. Calm. Human. And then the moment closed again. His jaw tightened, his focus snapping back, but it was too late to undo that flicker. Ava noticed it. Not fully, not consciously, but enough to feel the shift in the air. Enough to know something had changed, even if she could not name it. She lowered the wallet slightly, waiting, giving the moment space to settle. But it did not settle. It stretched further, thinner, like glass under pressure. In the back seat, the boy's voice came again, softer this time, almost breaking. Are we going home? The question hung there, simple, innocent, cutting through everything else like it did not belong in this moment. Ava swallowed, her throat tightening just slightly, but her voice when it came was steady. Yes, she said quietly. We are going home. And outside, Officer Brooks did not answer. He just stood there, caught between something he had already decided and something he had just begun to question, his hand unmoving, his breath shallow, the distance between them no longer measured in space, but in a single choice that had not yet been made. The silence did not release them. It pressed in tighter, like the air itself had weight now, like every second that passed made it harder to breathe without breaking something invisible between them. Ava kept the wallet raised, her arm steady but beginning to feel the strain of holding still for too long, not from fear, but from the unnatural stillness of the moment. Her eyes remained forward, not locked on Brooks, not avoiding him either, just fixed somewhere between, as if looking directly at him might shift something she could not afford to move. The flashing lights continued their rhythm, red and blue washing over her face, then fading, then returning again, each pulse carving the scene into fragments that refused to settle into one reality. Outside, Brooks exhaled slowly, but it did not relax him. It sharpened him. His grip tightened at his side, his shoulders rising just enough to signal a decision forming, not fully realized but close enough to feel. He took one step closer to the window, close enough now that the reflection of his badge flickered across the glass, briefly overlapping Ava's face in the mirror. Two identities crossing without touching. Place it on the dashboard, he said, his voice low, controlled, but no longer neutral. There was tension in it now, something coiled beneath the surface. Ava did not argue. She nodded once, small and precise, and slowly moved her hand forward, lowering the wallet inch by inch until it rested on the dashboard, the soft sound of it touching plastic echoing louder than it should have in the enclosed space. She pulled her hand back immediately, placing it again on the steering wheel, fingers open, visible, exactly where they had been before. The repetition was intentional, predictable, safe. In the back seat, the boy leaned forward further, his seatbelt stretching against him, as if even the restraint could not hold his attention back. His eyes followed every movement, every shift, absorbing the tension without understanding it, only feeling its weight. Ava caught his reflection again, just a flicker, just enough to remind herself that this was not only about her, that it never had been. You are doing good, she whispered, barely audible, her voice softer now, meant to anchor him, to give him something steady to hold on to in a moment that offered nothing stable. Brooks heard it. Not the words, not clearly, but the tone. Something in it unsettled him. It did not match what he expected. It did not fit the version of this moment he had already constructed in his mind. His eyes narrowed again, but this time not from suspicion, from conflict. He reached forward slightly, his hand hovering just outside the open window, not touching, not crossing the boundary, but close enough to claim presence. Step out of the vehicle, he said, each word measured, deliberate, leaving no room for interpretation. Ava did not move right away, not because she was refusing, but because she understood the weight of what came next. Movement now meant leaving the small controlled space she had created, stepping into something less certain, less contained. Her fingers tightened briefly around the steering wheel, a single moment of hesitation that passed as quickly as it came. Then she nodded. Slowly, carefully, she released her grip and reached for the door handle, her movements deliberate, visible, leaving nothing to chance. The click of the lock releasing sounded louder than it should have, a sharp break in the quiet. The door opened just a few inches, enough to let the cooler night air slip inside, carrying with it the distant hum of traffic and something else. Something final. Ava paused there, halfway between inside and outside, her hand still on the door, her body not yet fully committed to either side. And for a brief second, everything held again. The lights, the air, the silence. Waiting. As if even the world itself was not ready to see what happened when she stepped out. The door opened wider, slowly, inch by inch, until the night air fully spilled into the car, cool against Ava's skin, carrying with it the distant hum of engines and the faint rustle of wind across the open road. She stepped out carefully, one foot touching the asphalt first, then the other, her movements deliberate, controlled, as if the ground itself required permission. The door remained open behind her, a quiet link to the small space she had just left, where the boy still sat, watching, waiting. Ava kept her hands visible, raised slightly away from her body, palms open, her posture calm but not rigid, grounded but aware. The flashing lights washed over her again, red then blue, turning her into a silhouette against the dark highway, then bringing her back into view. Officer Brooks took a step back as she emerged, creating space, but not easing the tension. His eyes followed every movement, his stance firm, his presence still pressing against the moment like something that refused to loosen its grip. "Turn around," he said, his voice steady but lower now, as if the weight of the situation had settled into it. Ava nodded once. She did not speak. She turned slowly, her movements measured, giving him nothing sudden, nothing unexpected, only control. Her back now faced him, her gaze falling briefly toward the open car door, toward the boy. For a second, their eyes met. He did not say anything this time. He just looked at her, his small face tight with confusion, fear held quietly behind it, like he was trying to be brave without knowing how. Ava gave the smallest nod, almost invisible, but enough. Enough to say she was still there. Enough to hold him steady. Then she faced forward again. Brooks shifted his weight, the gravel crunching softly beneath his boots, the sound cutting through the quiet like a reminder that this moment was real, that it was happening, that it could not be undone once it moved forward. He reached toward his radio, his fingers brushing it, but not pressing, hesitating for just a fraction of a second before pulling his hand back. That hesitation lingered, unnoticed by him, but present, like a crack forming beneath the surface. "Walk toward my voice," he instructed, each word precise, controlled, leaving no room for interpretation. Ava took a step, then another, each one slow, careful, her shoes making soft contact with the pavement, the rhythm steady, intentional. The distance between them shortened, but the tension did not. It shifted, tightened, coiled into something heavier. The flashing lights continued, but now they felt distant, like they belonged to another scene, another moment. This one had narrowed, focused, reduced to movement and breath and the space between them. In the car, the boy leaned forward as far as the seatbelt allowed, his small hands gripping the edge of the seat, his eyes wide, unblinking. He did not understand the instructions. He did not understand the rules. He only understood that Ava was moving away from him, step by step, into something he could not follow. "Miss Ava," he whispered again, softer this time, his voice barely carrying through the open door. Ava heard it. Of course she did. Her shoulders tightened just slightly, the only sign that the moment had reached her, that it had touched something deeper than control. But she did not turn. She could not. Instead, she spoke forward, her voice steady, quiet, but firm enough to reach him. "Stay right there," she said. "I am still here." The words settled into the space between them, fragile but real, a thread connecting them even as distance grew. Brooks watched her closely, his expression unreadable now, no longer just suspicion, no longer just control, but something more complicated, something unsettled. He was no longer only reacting, he was deciding, and that made the moment heavier than before. Ava took another step, and then another, each one bringing her closer to him, further from the car, further from safety, further from certainty. The night seemed to close in around them, the highway noise fading into something distant, irrelevant. There was only this space, this moment, this choice that had not yet been made, but was already shaping everything that would follow. The distance between them closed, but the tension did not ease. It deepened, settling into the space like something heavier than sound, something that could not be seen but could be felt in every breath. Ava stopped when his voice did not ask for another step, her body still, her hands still open at her sides, the cool night air brushing against her skin as if reminding her she was still here, still present, still in control of the only thing she could control. The flashing lights behind Brooks slowed in her perception, each pulse stretching longer, red then blue, like time itself had begun to bend around the moment. He stood just a few feet away now, close enough that she could hear the faint shift of his breath, the slight movement of fabric as his chest rose and fell, uneven, controlled but not steady. For the first time, neither of them spoke. The instructions had stopped. The movement had stopped. What remained was something else entirely. Ava kept her gaze forward, not searching, not challenging, simply existing in the space she had been placed in, her posture calm but not passive, grounded in something deeper than the situation itself. Behind her, the open car door creaked slightly as the wind moved through it, a small sound that echoed louder than it should have, reminding both of them that there was still a child watching, still a witness to everything that had unfolded. Brooks noticed it. His eyes flicked past Ava for just a fraction of a second, catching the silhouette of the boy in the back seat, small, still, unmoving except for the slight rise and fall of his shoulders. That image lingered longer than it should have. It did not match the version of control he had constructed. It did not fit into the pattern he had been following. And for a moment, that disruption showed. His jaw tightened, then released slightly, his stance shifting not outward, but inward, like something inside him had taken a step back. Ava sensed it, not fully, not consciously, but enough to feel the pressure change, like the air had shifted direction. Her fingers relaxed slightly, the tension in her shoulders easing by a fraction, not enough to be seen, but enough to be real. The night around them seemed quieter now, the highway noise distant, almost irrelevant, as if the world had narrowed itself to this single stretch of asphalt, this small pocket of time where something important was deciding what it would become. Brooks exhaled again, longer this time, his breath visible for a moment before disappearing into the dark. He lowered his gaze briefly, just enough to break the constant line of focus, just enough to create a pause that had not existed before. When he looked back up, something had changed. Not completely, not enough to erase what had already been set in motion, but enough to introduce doubt. And doubt was new. Ava did not move. She waited, not passively, but with a kind of quiet strength, the kind that did not demand anything but did not yield either. Her presence remained steady, unchanged, as if she refused to let the moment define her, even as it pressed in around her. In the car, the boy shifted again, the faint sound of his movement carrying across the short distance, softer now, more controlled, as if he had learned something in the silence, something about waiting, about holding still when everything felt uncertain. Ava heard it. Of course she did. And this time, she allowed herself a breath that was deeper than before, a small release that did not break her composure, but strengthened it. Brooks noticed that too. The steadiness, the lack of reaction, the absence of what he expected, and it unsettled him more than anything else had. His hand moved slightly, not toward action, but away from it, a subtle shift that changed the balance of the moment in a way that could not be undone. The space between them remained the same, but it no longer felt like a line of confrontation. It felt like a question, and neither of them had answered it yet. The question in the air did not stay unanswered for long, but it did not resolve. The way either of them expected, it shifted again, deeper this time, pulling something buried to the surface. Brooks straightened slightly, his shoulders firming as if returning to something familiar, something structured, something that required less uncertainty. His voice came again, but it carried a different weight now, not louder, not harsher, just more certain than before, as if he needed it to be. "Do you have anything else in the vehicle I should know about?" he asked, each word measured, controlled, but no longer entirely neutral. Ava did not react immediately. She let the question settle, not because she was searching for an answer, but because she understood what it meant beneath the surface. It was not just a question. It was a decision trying to justify itself. She shook her head slowly. "No, sir," she said, her voice steady, grounded, without hesitation. The word "sir" landed gently, without resistance, without challenge, but it carried something else with it, something that did not match the tension surrounding them. Respect without fear. And that unsettled him more than defiance would have. Brooks' eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in confusion, as if the pieces in front of him refused to align into something he recognized. His gaze flickered again toward the car, toward the open door, toward the boy who had not moved, who had not spoken again, who simply watched. That image stayed longer this time. It pressed against the edges of the moment, refusing to be ignored. Ava saw the shift. This time, she felt it clearly. Not a release. Not yet. But a crack in something that had been solid only seconds ago. She took a breath, deeper than before, her chest rising slowly, then falling just as controlled. "He is just a child," she added quietly, not as a defense, not as a plea, but as a fact. Simple. Undeniable. Brooks did not respond right away. His jaw tightened again, but it did not hold. It loosened slightly, his gaze dropping for a brief second before returning to her. That second mattered. It was enough to let something through. Something human. The flashing lights behind him continued, but they felt different now, less urgent, less sharp, as if the moment itself had begun to soften at the edges. The highway noise crept back in, faint at first, then more present, reminding them that the world had not stopped, that this moment existed within something larger, something that did not revolve around control or fear. Ava remained still, her posture unchanged, her presence steady, offering nothing new, nothing sudden, only consistency. And that consistency became its own kind of force. Brooks shifted his weight again, but this time it was not tension. It was reconsideration. His hand moved once more, hovering near his radio, then lowering again, the motion slower, less reactive. He looked at Ava differently now, not as a problem to solve, not as a situation to control, but as something he had not fully understood. And that realization did not come with clarity. It came with discomfort. Ava met his gaze for the first time fully, not challenging, not avoiding, simply present, her eyes calm, tired, but unwavering. It was not a stare. It was recognition. And for a moment, neither of them moved. The space between them held, but it was no longer tight. It was open, uncertain, waiting. In the car, the boy shifted again, this time leaning back slightly, his small hands loosening their grip, his breathing slowing just a little. He felt it too. The change. Subtle but real. Ava noticed that as well, a small relief settling into her chest, not enough to relax, but enough to hold on to. Brooks exhaled, longer this time, his shoulders lowering by a fraction. It was not surrender. It was not resolution. But it was something. And in that small shift, the moment changed again, no longer driven by assumption alone, but by something more fragile, more uncertain. Something that could still go either way. The air shifted again, but this time it did not tighten. It softened, almost imperceptibly, like a storm deciding whether to pass or break. Brooks lowered his gaze for longer than before, not out of authority, not out of control, but out of something heavier, something closer to reflection. The flashing lights behind him continued their rhythm, but they no longer dominated the moment. They simply existed, background to something more human unfolding in the space between them. Ava remained still, her posture unchanged, her hands open, her presence steady in a way that did not demand anything yet refused to disappear. She did not fill the silence. She allowed it to speak. Brooks finally looked back up, his eyes no longer fixed in the same rigid line, no longer locked into a single interpretation. There was something else there now. Uncertainty, yes, but also recognition. Not complete, not resolved, but enough to alter the weight of what came next. His shoulders lowered slightly, the tension that had held them high easing just enough to be seen if someone was looking closely. "All right," he said, his voice quieter now, not carrying the same sharp edge, not pressing, just present. The words did not end the moment, but they changed it. Ava heard it immediately. Not just the word, but the tone, the shift beneath it. She did not move, not yet. She understood that change did not mean safety. It meant possibility. and possibility required patience. Brooks glanced once more toward the car, toward the boy, who had now leaned back fully into his seat, his small hands resting in his lap, his breathing slower, more even. He was still watching, but he was no longer frozen. That image settled into Brooks in a way that could not be undone. It stayed there, pressing quietly against everything he had assumed just moments before. Ava spoke again, softly, not to challenge, not to explain, but to ground the moment in something real. "He has been through enough today," she said, her voice low, steady, carrying no accusation, only truth. Brooks did not respond immediately. His jaw shifted, not tightening this time, but loosening, as if the effort of holding on to certainty had become heavier than letting it go. He stepped back half a pace, a small movement, but one that changed the distance in a way that could be felt more than seen. The space between them opened, not as a barrier, but as release. Ava noticed it. Of course she did. Her shoulders eased just slightly, her breath deepening, not fully relaxed, but no longer held. The moment was not over, but it was no longer closing in. It was expanding. Brooks lifted a hand, not in command, not in warning, but in pause, a gesture that felt almost unfamiliar in the context of everything that had come before. You can stay where you are," he said, the hesitation in his voice brief but real, a sign of something shifting beneath the surface. Ava nodded once, a small acknowledgement, her eyes steady, meeting his without resistance. It was not agreement. It was understanding. Behind her, the open car door moved slightly again with the wind, a soft creak that now felt less like tension and more like something settling back into place. The highway noise returned more fully, cars passing, tires humming, life continuing just beyond the edge of this moment. And in that return, something else followed. Perspective. Brooks looked around for the first time, not just at Ava, not just at the car, but at the road, the lights, the world that had continued without interruption. And in that wider view, the moment shrank just enough for him to see it differently. Not as a threat, not as a confrontation, but as something that could have gone another way. Ava remained where she was, grounded, present, her calm unchanged, not because the situation had demanded it, but because she had chosen it from the beginning. And that choice had reshaped everything. Brooks exhaled again, slower this time, his shoulders lowering further, the last of the rigid tension leaving his stance. He did not speak right away. He did not need to. The shift had already happened. And for the first time since the lights had flashed behind her car, the moment felt like it might end without breaking. The moment did not end with a command or a conclusion. It faded, slowly, like tension releasing its grip without needing to announce it. Brooks took another step back, not abrupt, not dramatic, just enough to return space that had once been taken. His hands lowered fully now, no longer hovering, no longer poised for reaction, simply resting at his sides as if the need for control had loosened its hold. Ava noticed the shift immediately, not as relief, but as permission to breathe more fully, her chest rising deeper, her shoulders settling into a natural position for the first time since the lights had appeared behind her. She did not rush. She did not move quickly. She simply turned her head slightly toward the car, her eyes finding the boy again. This time, he was not frozen. He blinked, slowly, his small frame easing back into the seat, his grip no longer tight, his breathing steady. Ava gave him a small nod, softer than before, a quiet signal that the moment had passed its sharpest edge. Brooks watched that exchange without interrupting, his expression no longer guarded in the same way, but thoughtful, unsettled in a different sense, as if he was replaying something he had not fully understood until now. The flashing lights behind him continued, but they felt distant, unnecessary, like they belonged to a version of the moment that no longer existed. He reached up and turned slightly, his hand brushing the light bar control inside the vehicle behind him. The intensity dimmed, not fully gone, but softened, the red and blue no longer cutting sharply across the scene, just lingering at the edges. That change, small as it was, shifted everything again. Ava turned her body back toward the car, her movements calm, measured, as she walked the short distance back to the open door. The asphalt beneath her feet felt solid again, real, no longer suspended in uncertainty. She reached the door and paused for just a second, her hand resting on the frame, grounding herself in something familiar before leaning slightly inward. "We are okay," she said gently, her voice warm now, carrying something that had been held back until this moment. The boy nodded, a small movement, but certain. Ava straightened and closed the door softly. The click final, but not harsh, more like a closing of something that had already ended. Brooks remained where he was, watching, but not intervening, his posture no longer rigid, his presence no longer pressing. He took a breath, then another, slower each time, as if recalibrating something internal that had been thrown off balance. Ava turned back toward him one last time, her expression calm, not seeking approval, not offering judgment, simply present. Their eyes met again, but this time there was no tension in it, only acknowledgement. Brooks gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, but enough. Enough to mark that something had changed, even if neither of them would name it out loud. Ava turned back, opened the driver's door, and slid into her seat, her hands returning to the wheel, the same position as before, but the moment no longer the same. The interior of the car felt warmer now, the space familiar again, the quiet no longer heavy. She glanced once more in the rearview mirror, meeting the boy's eyes, and this time there was no fear in them, just trust. She started the engine, the low hum steady, grounding, real. Outside, Brooks stepped back further, giving the road back to her without words. The headlights stretched forward into the night, the highway opening again, wide and uninterrupted. Ava eased the car forward, slowly at first, then merging back into the flow of traffic, the moment dissolving behind her into something that could not be undone, but did not need to be repeated. In the rearview mirror, the flashing lights grew smaller, dimmer, until they became just another part of the distance. And in that quiet, with the road stretching ahead and the boy's steady breathing filling the car, the silence that remained was no longer heavy. It was something else, something earned,